Dad built a cabin in Alaska. 6 months later, nobody recognized him. When Nathaniel Carter told his family he was building a cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, they thought it was just another one of his soul-searching retreats. A way to clear his head after the layoffs, the stress, and the silence that had grown between him and his wife, Lena. Their 2 sons, Will and Noah, didn't understand why their dad needed to be alone in the cold for 6 months, but Nathaniel promised he'd come back better. Stronger. Just a man, the trees, and a little peace, he said with a forced smile. He left in late April, when the last of the frost clung to the trees like forgotten memories. The drive north took 2 days. The hike to the land took 2 more. He carried everything on his back: tools, journals, a satellite phone, a solar panel kit, and a small black box from his father's attic. He didn't tell anyone about the box. It didn't seem important. Not then. The plot of land had been his grandfather's. A surveyor's claim never developed. Nathaniel found it listed under an old family trust, forgotten but still his. The coordinates led to a clearing surrounded by black spruce and stillness so deep it pressed against his ribs. He built the cabin slowly. By hand. Hammer and nail, log by log. Every day was survival. Chopping wood. Filtering water. Watching the horizon for bears. But it was also quiet. Focused. Meditative. Until it wasn't. By mid-June, something shifted. Nathaniel's journals, which he'd been writing in daily, started to unravel. What began as detailed sketches of wildlife and timber diagrams became frantic scrawls of eyes in trees. Whispering winds that said his name. A figure, just out of focus, always watching from the tree line. He stopped calling home. Lena's texts went unanswered. The satellite phone remained active but silent. It was Will who first said it out loud. What if something happened to Dad? Back in Alaska, Nathaniel had stopped sleeping. He'd hear tapping under the floorboards of the cabin, even before the floor was finished. The black box he brought from his father's attic? It started clicking at night, like an old Geiger counter, or a heartbeat. Inside were faded photographs of the land, but not of his grandfather, of men in uniforms, equipment that didn't belong in the 1940s, and a journal with one sentence underlined again and again. The forest remembers. One morning in July, Nathaniel woke up outside. The cabin door was wide open. Snow had fallen, despite it being summer. His boots were on the roof. He remembered building a second cabin. But there was no second cabin. He remembered a voice telling him, "You were always here, Nathaniel." Then came the lights. Not fire. Not lanterns. Lights that pulsed in the fog. They circled his cabin. They drifted in and out of the woods like curious insects. Sometimes they hummed. Sometimes they whispered in voices he recognized. His father's, his own as a child. That night, Nathaniel opened the black box again. Inside was a photo, recent, of him, sleeping in the forest. A shadow stood behind him. It had no face. 6 months later, in late October, a man walked into a rural outpost in Yukon, Alaska. His beard was unkempt, his eyes unfocused. He asked the store clerk where the nearest phone was. "I need to call my wife," he said. The clerk handed him a mirror instead. The man recoiled, because the reflection didn't look like him. His eyes were too dark, his skin too pale. His voice trembled with something not entirely human. He called Lena. She didn't answer, but Will did. "Who is this?" the boy asked. "It's me, Dad." There was a pause. Then Will whispered, "My dad died in July." Lena drove to Alaska with Will and Noah 3 days later. The local police had called her, said her husband was in shock, malnourished, raving about lights and shadows and a second cabin that nobody could find. When she arrived at the station, she saw him and froze. It looked like Nathaniel, but wrong. His smile was slightly crooked, his speech delayed, his presence off, like someone pretending to be someone they'd never met. "Where's the cabin?" Lena asked. He led them into the woods, but not to where he said it was. They found nothing. No structure. No black box. No footprints. Only an old photograph, pinned to a tree. It showed 4 men standing in the exact clearing, in 1948. One of them looked exactly like Nathaniel. "We'll found it first. Buried beneath a frost-covered mound, the real cabin. Half collapsed. Inside, journals. Photographs. The black box. And a body. Decomposed. Face down. Wearing the same jacket Nathaniel had left home in." Lena screamed. Will picked up the final journal entry. Written in trembling hand. "I am still here. But I'm not alone." They turned around. Nathaniel, or the man who claimed to be, stood in the clearing, smiling. Then he said something he never should have known. "Tell your grandfather I kept his promise." And the forest fell silent again.